From the national head of the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives, now we go to the state of Pennsylvania. We talk about building a bench. Seems appropriate now when we start the baseball season this week, and building a good bench, and we have the Final Four coming up today, and building a good bench, or as good as your bench is, right? We've got a couple people that know a little something about that, and they are the state people associated with the Freedom Caucus here in the state of Pennsylvania. Andrew Roth is currently the president of the State Freedom Caucus Network. He advocates for economic freedom and limited government. He's from Kansas. He now lives in Virginia, just inside the realm of the evil empire, and manages to stay clean of that. On the other side, Dawn Keefer is the representative from the 92nd Legislative District. And I was just asking them in the backstage here, because Dawn is kind of shy and retiring, as many of you have read. No, Dawn is a person that tells it like it is. She is the head of the Freedom Caucus here in the state of Pennsylvania, out of the State House for the 92nd Legislative District. And she is an uncompromising voice of freedom. And the two of them are going to have a little chat right now about building a bench. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Roth and Dawn Keefer.
Thank you, everybody. First off, I want to thank Scott Perry for everything that he's done at the House Freedom Caucus, and they're doing a wonderful job, and what we're trying to do is take it to the state. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain what the mission is of the State Freedom Caucus Network, and then I'll pass it over to Dawn to explain what's going on in your state. Basically, we knew that the House Freedom Caucus has a great brand, they have great members, and they are exactly what we need in D.C. Remember, they were launched in 2015, and almost out of the gate, they unseated the House Speaker, John Boehner, as one of the first things they did, with the help of Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Scott Perry. And in my previous line of work, I was looking at the state level, and I know for certain, and I know everybody in this room does, is that there are 50 swamps in the 50 states. And most people, unlike this room, most people don't know who their state rep is. They don't know who their state senator is. Very little media coverage is at the state level for what happens in the state capitol. That is by design. The establishment wants to operate in the dark because then they can do stuff without any accountability. And the thing that you should know about the establishment, look at your governor. How many staffers does he have? How many advisors? How many consultants? How many lawyers? He has it all. He has lots of resources year-round. Look at the woke bureaucracies that are running your government. They are well-funded, well-staffed, with all they need. Then look at the lobbyists. They have everything they need too. Their pockets are deep. All three of those, that iron triangle, that operates 365 days out of the year. Now, Pennsylvania is different. You have a full-time legislature, but most states are part-time lawmakers. So when they gavel out of session, who's minding the store? Like, who's keeping track of these folks? I had one House Freedom Caucus member, a colleague of Scott, who was a state rep before he came to Congress, and he said, "That's completely true, Andy. I had a lobbyist come and whisper in my ear during session, and he said, I can't wait for you guys to go home because then we can take over." This is the problem that we have at the state level. So the State Freedom Caucus Network, which is the organization I run, our job is to help state lawmakers like Don and David Rowe and other state lawmakers help set up a State Freedom Caucus. We launched in December of 2021 with Georgia Freedom Caucus. They were our first one. Then we went to Mississippi, South Carolina, on and on and on. And then in November, we launched the Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus. And I can tell you that this is going to be the loudest voice for freedom in your state. We have Scott Perry to thank to represent you guys in DC, but somebody needs to represent you guys in Harrisburg. And the thing that you can count on with the Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus is that it's year-round. It's always going to be there. Dawn is eventually going to retire or maybe move on to higher office. David Rowe, the other members of the Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus, they'll come and go. but a Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus will always be in this state fighting for you guys. And that's what we want to do. Before you leave, I want you to meet Nick Karen, who is our state director. Stand up, Nick. He is your point of contact for the Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus, besides going directly to Don, David, and the others. But I urge you, please get in contact with the Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus, get their emails, get their tweets, get their Facebook posts, and engage with them. If you do that, then you're humming on all cylinders, and you guys are going to start winning some very important battles. But now I'll pass it over to Don.
So to echo what Andy has spoken about, in Pennsylvania, what we learned quickly as you come in as a rank and file member, the staff is not your staff. You have district staff, and they're handling constituent services. And then you will have an assistant in Harrisburg, and sometimes you'll share that assistant. And then all the research staff, they work for leadership. So whatever you're doing, it's for leadership that they're working for. And I went with policy to various committees that we had in the staff, and they would say things like, well, PennDOT isn't going to like that, or you're going to have a hard time getting labor and industry support for that, which I found shocking because, right, they're supposed to facilitate the policy we write, right? We write the laws. And so my first reaction was, well, I didn't see PennDOT's name on the ballot, so why are we worrying what PennDOT's going to say? I mean, I'm interested in how things are going to work in practicality sense, but we won't run fundamental policy, well, because we just don't want the fight. And so it's usually political expediency, like what's hard. And I used to always joke my first session, it was like, well, now's not a good time, and it's really hard. And that's half of what we're doing there. And my biggest frustration is members doing what my colleague Wendy Fink was talking about, right? They say one thing, it sounds great, you agree with them, and then they get to Harrisburg and they do something else. And so many of my colleagues are busy running around begging our leadership not to put up a vote, because nobody ever lost an election for a vote they never took. And so that's their goal. Don't make me vote one way or another. And my frustration is I would always say, put it on the board. Just put the vote on the board, because that will be telling. A lot of people will whip whenever they're counting the votes, whipping the votes, and they'll say, I'm a no, I'm a no, I'm a no. But if it goes on the board, they're a yes. And so fundamental policy, is just passed by leadership because, well, it's hard and, there's no strategy or plan. So having the Freedom Caucus, right, we have the numbers. So I've watched different caucuses within the Republican caucus be able to steer the ship with just 8 to 10 members. So with 22 members, we can at least be a wall, right, to stop bad policy, to make sure things are constitutional, to make sure that they're fiscally sound. And we were beat up initially saying, hey, this is extreme. Didn't the voters just rebuke this? And I don't know what they're really talking about there, because we are literally talking about budgetary things. We are talking about good government, keeping government, the size of government down. We're talking about accountability. Those are not partisan issues. Those are just good government issues that win across the board, and we're just making sure people are held accountable. So it's like Andy said, they want this quiet, right? I'm in the Harrisburg media market. I'm in northern York County, so my papers cover a lot of what happens in Harrisburg. But if you go further out, if you are in Bedford County or Warren County, right, they're not covering all these issues here. So you can vote one way here, and then you can do whatever in the district because nobody knows any different, and that's on purpose. I mean, talk about who knows something before you do. Half the time we learn about things from the lobbyists before we're doing it. The leadership vote, we started getting messages that, hey, I understand that you guys are going to put up a Democrat. I'm hearing that from lobbyists, not from our leadership, that that's going to happen. So, and that shouldn't be. So again, if we have the Freedom Caucus here, we have that backing, we have a group of people, well, they know they're going to have to at least have a conversation with us before something gets done. And in the past, I worked on some other different caucuses. We had the Common Sense Caucus. We fought against the budget in 2017, and we had success. But then our leadership figured out who they were, and were able to pick us up one by one because, A, we didn't have the staff. They weren't our staff. And we didn't have any kind of financial support, any communication strategy. Having the Freedom Caucus's support, having an executive director help us facilitate and get our message out there to communicate with the public what's going on, what's actually happening in Harrisburg is key. And that's going to help you hold your legislators accountable, because we've gotten where we've gotten because we sat on the sidelines for so long. You don't hold your legislator accountable. And when it comes time for election, you say, well, he's a really nice guy. You know, he came to my veterans dinner, or he came to my, meat raffle. He's so nice. Well, that's great. My grandma's nice, right? But she shouldn't be the state representative. There's a lot of nice people. Are they doing what they said they'd do, right? Are they holding the line on these things? And that's what's happening. We're not holding anybody accountable. So just making sure there's that transparency and accountability. We always say transparency is the best disinfectant there is, and that's what we want in government.
One thing, on the panel earlier, Wendy, Joe, and Jarrett, they were talking about, how do you know whether your state rep is good or not? This is one thing I will tell you, and I'll give some examples in other states. Do not look at the R or the D after a person's name. Those are no longer relevant anymore. There are insiders and there are outsiders. There are establishment and there are fighters. Those are the things that you need to grade going forward. And you can find that out by engaging with CAP, Commonwealth Foundation, the Freedom Caucus. You can find out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. In Wyoming, we have a Wyoming Freedom Caucus. There are 57 Republicans to only 5 Democrats in the Wyoming House. Let me say that again. 57 Republicans to 5 Democrats. They don't have school choice. They did not pass a ban on transgender surgeries for minors. They want to expand Medicaid. Thankfully, they haven't done that yet. But with 57 Republicans out of 62, you would think it would be a mecca, an oasis of conservatism. It's one of the most conservative states in the union. It's because Democrats are deceiving voters because these Democrats run with an R after their name. When we looked at the voting records in Wyoming, the reality is that there are 36 liberals to 26 conservatives. That's the truth. The R's and the D's, that's not the truth. So I urge you to get rid of the party labels and look at the actual voting records. One other thing, in South Carolina, our South Carolina Freedom Caucus has 19 members out of 100 and something. They exposed their leadership in such a dramatic way that they got kicked out of the House GOP caucus. The South Carolina Freedom Caucus is now on an island by themselves, and frankly, they like it. But they have now fractured that state house to where there's Democrats, liberal Republicans, and the Freedom Caucus. And that's the way we should start seeing things going forward. One other thing. I mentioned that a state Freedom Caucus is year-round, and I know that the Pennsylvania legislature is a full-time operation. South Carolina, the South Carolina Freedom Caucus was able to force a hospital to shut down a transgender clinic and fire their lead doctor. And it didn't require a vote. It didn't require a bill. It required zero legislation. All it required was conservatives to come together, have a Freedom Caucus, and publicly put pressure on this hospital. And they did it out of session, and they did it because they were loud, noisy, and they riled up all of their grassroots base like what's in here.
And that is huge. So another thing that we've been working on as a Freedom Caucus is empowering local officials, right? We are not in the majority in the General Assembly right now. But what we're trying to do is there's a lot of power in your school boards. You have that local authority. You have that local authority in your municipalities, your townships, your boroughs. A lot of leeway of things that you can do there, and that we're helping them understand what the rules are, how to operate Robert's rules, how to conduct a meeting, and how to get some wins there, and how to flip some of these boards. We took a huge step in York County in 2021. We are going to double down on that in 2023 with that. So there's things that you can do in that level as well. Another talking about, again, pushing back against leadership. Last year, the budget, and my colleague, Senator Coleman said, the budget's huge. It's huge in Pennsylvania. And the way that we do it is backwards in Pennsylvania. it would blow your mind. It blows any accountant's mind. I would tell you to talk to Frank Ryan if you have like 3 or 4 hours. And that's cutting it short. But last year, we get our little packet. The budget comes out after the governor gives his presentation, and we say, oh, it's voodoo math, right? It's it was a 17% increase. It's outrageous. All the little pie charts and graphs and all of that. We ended up at the end of the day spending $300 million more than the governor asked for. And when we got our little packet, we got that budget. I think it was like maybe 12 hours prior to them wanting us to vote on it. But we got the packet, and they were telling us it was 2.9% increase. 300 million more, but only a 2.9% increase. How is that? Even backing out the federal dollars, I'm still at least 9% increase. And this is Republicans, right? You have Republicans in charge there. And then we're being pressured. Every day you don't vote yes on this budget, the price tag goes up. The price tag goes up. Because they have everybody on board. That, or they threaten you with, we're not going to run your bill, which happened to me 2 years in a row, or you're not going to get your RCAPs, right? You're not going to hand out the money in your districts. So it's understanding that there's a lot of pressure coming from the districts on these legislators when they get to Harrisburg, like, aren't you going to support my $2 million RCAP, which is essentially what we used to call WHAMs? And that's the leverage that they hold over you. So if you don't know that coming in, or you don't have a support group like the Freedom Caucus, it's really tough to stand up to that, to understand it, to navigate it, to see what's coming down the pipeline. So fighting for rules, that's something that at the federal level, they're helping us navigate, here's how to get through the rules, here's how to amend your rules, here's how to use your rules to win some things on the floor, on some policy and procedure things that we could possibly get using the rules. So that's where we're getting the support, and that's where we'll have an impact. Again, if there's a caucus, in Pennsylvania, in the Republicans' caucus that can wag the dog with essentially 9 members, there's a lot we can do with 22 members in the House of Representatives.
One thing that we talk about, and this is where you guys can get directly engaged, is every state freedom caucus, we urge them to do 4 things. And if you do these 4 things, you're unstoppable. You're gonna win. You're gonna win a lot, and when you lose, you're gonna make it painful for the bad guys to steal victory from you. One is vote together. When there's a consistent block of 22 people constantly voting the same way, that scares the heck out of the establishment, because they don't want to be on the opposite side of the Freedom Caucus on something. Number 2, plan together. Dawn, David, Wendy, Joe, the others, they constantly meet and they constantly strategize on how to fight. Number 3, defend each other. And this is where you guys can come in. When leadership goes after one of their members publicly, you need to come back twice as bad, twice as harsh against them. So they'll think twice about doing it again. And that's where you guys can come in and defend them as well. And number 4, and this is the most important thing, is be loud. If a conservative does something righteous in the woods, does it matter? Did it happen? No, you have to be loud in everything you do. So when Aaron Bernstein, during the rules debate, got up on the floor and attempted to read the entire rules package in front of the Democrats, how many people saw that? That was the most amazing thing ever. And his best quote was, "Are the beatings going to continue?" Like, he was directly challenging the Democrats and the establishment in Harrisburg when he did that. That you have to be loud in everything you do, because it will expose the liberal Republicans and the establishment, and it will force them to defend their own actions to their voters. And I'll tell you what, when you're winning, when liberal Republicans go home and voters say, "Hey, why aren't you in the Freedom Caucus? Why?" And when they get enough of those questions, it's going to start to upset them severely. And then they're going to try and punish the Freedom Caucus for exposing them. So those are the things that we're trying to do day in and day out, not only in Pennsylvania, but around the country.
So, a bunch of people have been asking yesterday and today, who our members are. Some of them we self-identify, so we don't release a list, and that's helpful for us with leadership. So when they can start targeting and knowing exactly who they are and start penalizing us one by one or picking us off. It's not helpful. So just knowing that we have that block, not everybody's going to disclose who they are, and our organization is by invitation only. So it's not something that, somebody can just say, hey, I'm coming here to join. We have to see your voting record. So even the new members that we have are transitional members, just so we can see a voting record, right? They have to demonstrate that they're going to toe the line and that they are going to stick on the conservative issues. And we don't vote on anything that 80% of our members don't all agree that are priorities for us. So we have that buy-in from all of our members. It's that everybody will stick on these issues so that we have that block. And that's what makes us relevant, because once you start picking us off, that we have nothing, we have no leverage. And we'll be your wall right now. This is what you're going to need. There's going to be crazy, crazy policy coming forward. Our chairwoman of health, Kathy Rapp, is here in the audience. And we just had a meeting this past week. And it was the things they're just that they're calling low-hanging fruit. They can't figure out how to do it. It's so terribly written. So we're going to at least do what we can, amending it, making it difficult. They're not just going to run roughshod. Like, they're going to have to navigate some amendments and put up some tough votes if they're going to try to run some of these crazy policy ideas. We're only off by one, so it's not like they're going to be able just to take the reins and go. But you need somebody that you can trust that will stand on that wall.
Thank you, everybody. Please go to statefreedomcaucus.org to learn more about what we're trying to do. Please talk to Nick about the Pennsylvania Freedom Caucus. And all I urge you guys, just stay engaged, keep fighting, because these guys need your support more than ever when they charge up that hill. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.